Some people always ask me, like, how do I believe that I can heal when I'm told repeatedly by doctors who I'm supposed to be trusting that healing is possible for me? And I say, just start with the curiosity. If you're not ready to fully believe that you can fully recover and that you can heal, just say, what if I could heal? What if that's a possibility? And as time goes on, that curiosity can eventually turn into belief.
I'm Riley Reese. This is the Sofia Unfiltered podcast where we bring together thought leaders, wellness entrepreneurs, makers, and emerging health leaders. We're here to have raw, unfiltered conversations because sharing your stories has the power to change lives, help others heal, and transform the way we take care of ourselves. Here we go. Welcome back to Sofia Unfiltered, the podcast where real stories spark real change. At Sofia Unfiltered, we believe that sharing our experiences have the power to heal, transform, and connect us in ways that nothing else can. We strip away the noise and get real about the struggles, triumphs, and breakthroughs in health and wellness, because the journey to healing is rarely a straight line. In this episode, we're honored to welcome Rachael Green. She's a passionate health blogger and chronic illness warrior. For years, she battled severe pain, fatigue, and debilitating neurological symptoms, living with diagnoses like the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, chronic Lyme disease, dysautonomia, and more. At her worst, she was bedbound, barely surviving. But through her work, her brain retraining, nervous system regulation, she's reclaimed her life. Now she's thriving, working, traveling, hiking, and even rock climbing. Her story is one of resilience, hope, and the incredible power of the human body to heal. If you've ever felt stuck in your own health journey, this episode's for you. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Rachael, and I appreciate your time today. Can you walk our listeners through your journey, maybe sharing that first moment you first realized something was wrong with your health?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I guess just to give you a bit of background for my stories, when I was in my early 20s, I became severely ill when I was in college. And in my childhood and teen years, I had some signs of things not being quite right, but I really had kind of that health crash happen when I was about 20 years old. And I was in college at the time, and I was an athlete, I was a rock climber, and kind of I guess you could say, like, a high achiever personality where I didn't really know how to properly rest and take care of my body, wasn't feeling my body right, nutrition-wise.
But you were super young too, right? Most people aren't thinking, oh, think of my body at this age. You're mostly like, go, 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 go.
Yes, definitely, and so I kind of lived that lifestyle, and I think when you're young, it kinda works until it doesn't, right? And so I started getting really lightheaded when I was working out, and I started getting migraines that were worsening. I kinda had migraines, like, off and on growing up, but they started to get worse, and I think this was actually triggered by a mono infection that kind of just, like, I never recovered from it, and I think maybe that was what sort of set me over the edge, and I just, like, didn't get better. I kind of expected at first, I was like, "Oh, well, I'll just get better," you know? And things just kinda continued to get worse. I was very fatigued, and I got to the point where I wasn't able to attend my classes, and I was just kind of spending most of my time in bed and just, like, feeling very dizzy, getting, like, fainting and pre-syncope episodes and brain fog, just didn't feel at all like myself. I knew something was wrong, and so I realized I needed to kinda try to figure out what was wrong, and, of course, growing up just believing that doctors can fix everything, I just went to the doctor, and I eventually got a diagnosis of POTS or dysautonomia, and we thought that that was the answer and that we'd be able to figure everything out, but years kind of went on, and I continued to kind of rack up the diagnoses. I was also diagnosed with, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, intracranial hypertension, Chiari malformation, spinal instability, the list kinda went on, and I had phases of, like, where something would help a little bit, and I'd be able to get back to doing more, and then I hit in kind of like a second crash where things got even worse, and this was actually not too long after I got married, and I started having episodes of non-epileptic seizures. I was struggling to walk. I needed to use a wheelchair. I mean, I was just debilitated with chronic pain and neurological symptoms. And I
What was
actually,
the time frame on this?
yeah, this was a couple of years from when I first knew that something was really wrong at about 20 to, I would say, yeah, it was probably 2 years up until that point where I kind of had like my second crash where things got even worse. And it's funny how like when you're in the state of chronic illness, you kind of think like, oh, like couldn't get worse, and then it did. And so I think I'm not really sure what the cause of things getting worse was, but I think it could have had something to do with, like, living at a higher elevation. I tended to do worse with that, and then also maybe just moving to a new home could have triggered the worsening of my illness. I'm not really sure what that is, and honestly, now it doesn't matter to me.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm just taking guesses. But it went downhill
It went
significantly.
downhill really, really fast, and I was continuing to just research and continuing to go the Western medicine route. We tried
But where
oh,
were the doctors in here when you were like going in? You're like, okay, you gave me all these diagnoses and now I need a wheelchair. What's going on? I mean,
we
what's that in this process?
so we saw lots of doctors, I mean, dozens and dozens and all sorts of specialists, and it seemed like I kept getting diagnoses and, like, getting medications and stuff, and honestly, a lot of these doctors really wanted to help. They didn't have the tools that I needed be able to actually heal and figure out the root of what was going on. And so like I said, I tried all sorts of medications. I didn't really do well with medications. I tended to be very sensitive to them. So I'd try them and then I'd come off because it just didn't seem to help. And actually, I think it was when I was 23, maybe, that I had my first neurosurgery. So I ended up having 5 brain and neurosurgeries, and I just continued to get sicker and sicker, and
What was the justification for doing the surgeries?
so the first surgery I had was it was for instability in my neck, and so they fused my, cervical spine to the base of my skull, and I also had a decompression surgery where they, like, shaved the base of my skull to, like, open up room for the brain because I had high pressure in my brain, and that was the
And they thought the Chiari malformation was causing.
right, and so that was kind of the justification behind that, and I actually after these surgeries, I actually got worse, and I kind of hit my lowest point about a year after these surgeries, and it was just a crazy time. I had an infection from one of the surgeries, and I had to have an emergency surgery from that, and I had to stay in the hospital and was on all sorts of IV antibiotics and just became very malnourished. I became very close to needing a feeding tube. To give you an idea, I've gained about 50 pounds since my lowest weights. And so I was very weak, very malnourished, and really struggled to eat. And after these surgeries, so I was wearing a neck brace as well, and for this instability in my neck, and that actually worsened after the fusion below where they did the surgery. And so I actually became more reliant on the neck brace, and it was just a scary time, and I was actually being recommended more surgery. They wanted to put a shunt in to relieve the high pressure in my brain, and there was just something inside of me that said, "This is not right." Like, I said, "I'd done this for years." I mean, and I've done all the things that the top specialists say would help, and here I am at my sickest, at my worst. Like, if I'm going to get better, to go a different path. And it was like this deep knowing of this is not working. Like, if I'm going to survive, if I'm going to live, and if I'm going to get better, then It has to be something else. And at this point, I
Like
didn't know what
4
that
years
was.
in, surgeries, you're laying there, can't think, malnourished, you have no idea what's going on, and you're like, "I'm done with this." And so many people with chronic illnesses really struggle to be taken seriously by doctors. Did you experience any of that? And how did you advocate for yourself at those points? Like, we know you got to this breaking point where, like, "I'm
Right.
done, I'm looking for something extra." But how did you manage being taken seriously?
Right. I would say I definitely did experience that to some extent, but I feel like I was blessed to have more support than a lot of people do in their chronic illness journeys, like from my family and whatnot. But we actually really did encounter doctors that genuinely cared and wanted to help. They just didn't have the right tools to do so. So I'm thankful that they tried. They did the best with the knowledge that they had, but it was definitely it was a struggle to find doctors that seemed to be able to know what was going on and to want to help, but even then, it was like, even if they had the best of intentions, what they were doing was not helping me and actually, I would say, harmful.
So, just for our listeners out there, so you had all of these different conditions.
Yep.
You actually, I think at one point you said Lyme disease too, on top
Right,
of
yes.
POTS and all of these other conditions. So you had all of this,
Yes.
and their path was neurosurgery, not really getting to what you said earlier, and I think that's like key, right? Root cause. What's
Yep.
the root cause of all of this? Right? Like we know we live in this healthcare system where we're really great at acute medicine, you know, break a bone, I'm good. But when it gets into the chronic illness,
Yep.
and I think a lot more doctors now and practitioners are getting to the what is the root cause of what's going on? And I think that's really, it sounds like that's where you were ready to get to at that point where you're in the hospital, like, I'm done. What's going on?
Absolutely, and I think, when I did get to that point, it was I didn't know what to do, but I kinda just trusted that I would find something, and I also made this mindset shift of, I'm going to be open-minded to anything, and I said, "Even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it seems
Sounds
weird or
strange.
crazy,
Right.
like, I'm gonna be willing to give anything a true."
Did you just go to Google and you're like, what do I do for
Yeah,
all these
so I
symptoms?
definitely did a lot of research. I One of the first things I found was people talking in Facebook groups about the carnivore diet, and so that was something that I one of the first things that really started to bring me improvements.
How did you go straight to a Facebook food group? Just
I
that
actually was
research.
in other support groups, like, for specific to my conditions, and I had seen a couple people posting about diet in those groups, and so that's what sparked my curiosity, and then I started to do further research on that after.
How diet affects chronic illness. Right.
Yeah, and I had tried quite a few different diets, like, I've been gluten-free for 10 plus years. I'd tried paleo stuff and hadn't seen a lot of the also vegetarian. Yeah, I tried a lot of them, but yeah, it was carnivore that really made the difference for me, and kind of around the same time, I became interested in nervous system work and brain retraining, and I read a book called You're the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but I was so uncomfortable the whole time reading the book. I was like, "This is crazy. I don't know about this," but it was, like, just that little seed that was planted where I became curious, and it didn't end up being Joe Dispenza's work that really resonated with me or was what brought me towards healing, but it was a seed that was planted that, like, showed maybe there's a possibility to actually heal from these things, even though I'm being told that this is incurable, that this is lifelong, that this is genetic, and there's no way to recover. And so I think that just that small seed was planted in that
Because
at
you have
time
to
when
be searching for something when you're being told you're done.
right.
There's no options. You're like, somebody give me hope. Right. So that's like step one is to get the hope.
Definitely, and I think something that always kind of stuck out to me is that a lot of people with these similar groups of chronic illness were previously very active people, athletes, high achieving type people, and to think that I could go from that and then get really sick and there's no way for me to get better, that didn't always quite resonate with me. And so I think just opening up to the possibility of, oh, like maybe they were wrong. Maybe I could get better was a huge turning point for me.
And who was it that was telling you, "This is it, this is lifelong, kind of get used to it"? I mean, who was that?
So doctors that I saw, the neurosurgeon, also a geneticist that I saw for the Ehlers-Danlos, and yeah, I remember my neurosurgeons telling me, "You're always gonna be in pain for the rest of your life." He was like, "We'll try to bring it down as much as we can, but you will always be in pain." And he was wrong. I'm not in pain anymore.
So, for our listeners out there who may be struggling with one or two or multiple symptoms, maybe similar to yours, maybe not, it really doesn't matter, right? What would you tell them if they're in the thick of it? You know, if they're in that those first stages back where you were when you were like 23, 24, what would you say to yourself back then?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say to try to focus on looking for recovery stories for people healing from chronic illnesses
Like yours.
and to just let that plant the seed that healing is possible, and also to recognize that our bodies are designed to heal, and that's an incredible thing. That's actually the biggest message that I want to share is that our bodies are designed to heal, and given the right conditions, will heal, and I think that that is a really impactful mental shift to make. And honestly, I would say like staying out of those chronic illness support groups online and just, I guess, focusing on things that you can do to help your recovery along. And yeah, just be willing to be open minded and try things that might seem different to you. And yeah, just to be encouraged that, healing is possible. There are a lot of people healing. And I think when you're in those chronic illness support groups, which for me, it was important to leave those in order to be able to heal because those groups really breed this sense of fear and desperation. And that continues to keep your nervous system in survival mode where healing really can't take place. And so while all those people are great and I met a lot of people through those groups, it's not about the people, it's about the fear and the hospital pictures and the pictures of, people being really sick and hopeless and desperate, and that just continues to signal messages of danger to your brain, and it's hard to heal when you continue in those spaces. And so I know I'm not the only one that has found it to be impactful to step back from those communities and kind of focus on joining communities that are focused on
Have
healing and believe in healing.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
to me, this sounds like, and a complete outsider, but it just sounds like it has to be a mental shift from
Mm,
I'm gonna be in this and live in this fear, panic, okay, this is the rest of my life, to I'm going to actually my body's gonna actually recover. It
definitely.
just sounds like it's a mentality.
Absolutely, and I think some people always ask me, like, "How do I believe that I can heal when I'm told repeatedly by doctors who I'm supposed to be trusting that healing is possible for me?" And I say, "Just start with the curiosity." If you're not ready to fully believe that you can fully recover and that you can heal, just say, "What if I could heal? What if that's a possibility?" And as time goes on, that curiosity can eventually turn into belief. And that's how it was for me. It wasn't like a overnight light bulb switch. It was a gradual thing. And I think as you focus your energy on, like I said, listening to recovery stories and that sort of thing, you can borrow other people's belief until you're ready to kind of shift that mindset yourself.
I think that's brilliant, right? I mean, and you're talking about the curiosity, you're like, "What if I can get out of this wheelchair? What if I can stand up on my own? What if I could eat this or that?" Right? Just that small spark of curiosity.
Absolutely, and one of the most impactful things for me was for a while there, I did a visualizations for an hour a day where I would visualize myself healthy and joyful and strong and being able to do all these things I hadn't been able to do for years. And I did this with a brain rewiring program that I followed and kind of just continued to expand my nervous system regulation practices as time went on. But just that verbal out loud visualization of showing my brain like, "Hey, this is possible for the future." And it's not about I think sometimes people when they hear that, they say like, "Oh, are you lying to yourself? Like, is that being dishonest or are you faking being well?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not. That is not. It's about showing your brain what your future can and will be like." And that for me was huge. And so that's when I really started to be able to like walk more and slowly
Which was
just
huge coming
back
from a
into life.
wheelchair. I mean, it
Yeah,
sounds, minor, but it's a huge, huge deal when you can actually walk again coming from a wheelchair, right?
definitely. And I think in about a month of doing this, 3 to 4 weeks of doing these visualizations every day, I went from not being able to walk to the end of my driveway to being able to walk a mile. And so that was pretty quick progress.
Yeah, for our listeners, let's talk about your recovery a little bit. So you read Joe's book and that didn't really do it, but you started having this spark of curiosity and interest and you're like, okay, I'm done with neurosurgeries. So what else did that look like? I mean, in the search, you
Yeah.
got into the diet and you're like, okay, I think you mentioned the brain rewiring. What did some of these alternative complementary treatments look like?
Yeah, so there were a lot of different things that have supported my healing, and I will say that I do like to emphasize that everything I've been doing to heal can come back to nervous system regulation, whether it's diet or brain retraining or sunlight, circadian rhythm, like, it's all about healing the nervous system, and so, like I said, doing stuff with diet, with the carnivore diet, that was kind of my introduction into healing, and I will say that, healing wasn't quick. Everybody wants to get better overnight.
We're in an instant gratification society, right?
Yes, but in order to heal from basically a lifetime of not treating your body properly, and that's gonna take a while, and that's okay. And it's gonna be up and down, and it's not gonna be completely linear, but that's okay. And so I just started to see these gradual improvements, and I tried to kind of record these and celebrate those victories to kind of focus on, like, yes, like, look at how much further I can walk now or whatever it is, or look how I can cook my own meals now, or just all these little victories and focus on those rather than focusing on, oh, like I wasn't able to do this or like I'm still feeling this pain here or whatever, like just kind of shifting my focus to those things that were going well.
Are you you're and to be so young to be able to do this, was this just brain rewiring? Is that where you learn to stay focused on the positive? I mean, with such an instant gratification society like you were talking about, how did you stay in it for the long run? Most people would quit after, right? It's like running a marathon. Most people are going to quit before they ever finish. How did you just keep going?
I think honestly, I would say even just seeing that other people had recovered was huge for me, and so just, like, seeing, well, that person was bedbound, and now they're living a full life. If they could have that happen, why not me? And I think also hearing that reality of it not being an instant thing, like, realizing, like, "Okay, like, this is gonna take a while, and that's okay," was really helpful for me knowing that, like, I'm not the only one, and just participating in even, like, Facebook groups that were more, like, focused on, like, healing or brain retraining or that sorta thing versus, just illness. Being able to interact with some people that were going through similar things, but also, like, were very much in the healing mindset was helpful for me.
For our listeners who may not be aware, can you just mention what is the brain
Yeah.
work that you were doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started with the, Dynamic Neural Retraining System program, DNRS. And I eventually, just because I became really passionate about neuroplasticity and nervous system regulation, I eventually went through the GUTA program and Primal Trust. And I would say, like, there are so many resources out there that have a similar message and whatnot. Now, there's so many options. I don't ever want to say, like, the way that I did it is the only way because there are always so many different paths to healing. And I think one thing that when I went into this program that I did, I told myself, I'm gonna take what resonates with me and leave the rest, and I'm gonna make it my own. And that's what I did, and I think sometimes when people do these brain retraining programs, they can get stuck in this mindset of, "I have to do the program strictly or else I won't heal," or, "I can't deviate from anything in the program or else I won't heal," and that mindset of going into it, I think is actually can kind of hinder healing in a way.
What were you doing in these programs?
With the visualization, the main thing was doing the visualizations for 1 hour a day. So it was like 15-minute segments of past and future visualizations where you are healthy and strong and you do these visualizations out loud. And there's kind of a series of steps that they have you go through before going into the visualization to help with like rewiring the brain. And they also just teach you things like letting go of limiting beliefs, kind of looking at and recognizing what sort of beliefs you have and are these limiting beliefs, and if so, how can we reframe them? And just recognizing thought patterns and interrupting them and kind of forming these new neural pathways to allow for change in the brain. And also a lot of things like elevating state of emotion and eventually I got into sort of processing past trauma and somatic practices and repressed emotions and that kind of thing, but I think in the beginning it was really good for me to kind of focus on the visualizations and working on elevating state of emotion for a while until my brain was ready to process that past trauma. Because I think sometimes when you're really in a severe survival crisis mode, your brain isn't quite ready to process that past trauma. Yeah, that's mostly how it looked.
You know what's incredible about this is you went from, okay, I'm sick, I have these surgeries to, okay, I'm working on mental health and diet, right? So I hear there's some diet changes involved in
Yeah,
here, and then you're working on your mental health, whether that's the NLP, the reprogramming, learning about all of these different tools that we have that are free in our brain to go through and to help, different kinds of things that you spent money on. We're not talking about pills anymore. We're not talking about surgeries. Like, how
yeah,
powerful is that?
absolutely, and I think one of the most common failures of our medical system is that we separate mental and physical health when they're inseparably connected. And truly, like, when I started to realize that the nervous system is the control center of the body, that it governs every physical function and organ in your body, that really started to make sense to me because when you're stuck in survival mode chronically, then your body isn't gonna function right. And in a lot of ways, this is something that happens subconsciously as a way for our brain to try to protect us, right? Even if we're not in danger anymore, it's like your brain is acting like you're being chased by a tiger. So naturally, your digestive system might not be working right. And it's like a ripple effect with real physical symptoms and real chronic illnesses that people get from being stuck in survival mode. And so I think that I'm really passionate about mental and physical health being inseparably connected.
Totally agree. I just think that we have to understand and accept what our healthcare system is today, and that is acute medicine, right?
Yes.
And if you need to find the root cause, if you need to do this other alternative, complementary mental health kinds of medicine, we'll call it therapies,
Yeah,
different types of modalities, you're going to have to look someplace else. I mean, and that's exactly why we built our platform, is to hopefully speed up that process to help people understand your mental and physical health are connected. Absolutely.
definitely. Yeah. I love that.
It took so long to be empowered. What could you tell our listeners who may be struggling with the shift of this mental shift, or they don't have that curiosity yet? They may still be in that early stage, listening to the doctors only. What would you tell them at that point?
Think that it's really important to remember that it's very empowering to take your health into your own hands. And in a way, our society kind of tells us that if there's something wrong with our health, then the doctor needs to come in to fix it. And whatever they say is going to be the right thing to do. And I'm not at all saying that there aren't great doctors because there are. And there are instances where modern medicine is needed. But I will say that doctors are often wrong. And in my case, if I continued following the advice of these doctors I was seeing who were top specialists in these conditions that I was diagnosed with, I don't know that I would be alive today. And so for me, taking my health into my own hands was scary, especially being that sick. But when I really stepped into that, it was empowering and it was, yeah, it changed everything. And so I think just recognizing that our bodies are designed to heal, and I do believe the most important part of healing will come from within, and that doesn't mean that there can't be things that you can do that are supportive or practitioners that can be helpful and supportive of your healing, but if you don't shift into that healing mindset, then it's likely that nothing will work. You know, it doesn't have to be all one or the other. I definitely have had things that have been helpful and supportive of my healing. I've had acupuncture, I've had gentle chiropractic, I've had therapy injections. These things have been supportive of my healing, but were they the most important part? They weren't. And so I think and that same goes for things like supplements or whatever, like, those things can all be supportive, but if you don't truly step into a healing mindset and change your thought patterns and look at your core beliefs, then it's likely that all these other things aren't gonna be enough to heal because when I stopped desperately relying on somebody else to come and save me, whether that be a treatment or a doctor, and I started to realize, oh, my body is capable of healing. That was actually one of the biggest turning points of my healing and very empowering as well. And so I think it's great if people want to find outside support and help. That's wonderful. There's so many great things to do, but it is really the most important thing is to get into that healing mindset and start believing it's possible for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do have one more question before we wrap up. Did the doctors notice a shift? Like, were you still going to the doctors when you had this pivotal moment and you're like, I'm taking my health into my own hands? Were they like, no, you still need surgery? Or were you just like, I'm not scheduling another appointment so that it just kind of went by the wayside? I'm just curious.
I kind of just stopped going. And I'm not saying that's the right decision for everyone.
I'm just curious if there's follow-up, because there's so many coaches and practitioners who are like, "You have been on the schedule, we need to get you in." I mean, I'm just curious, are they calling you? Like,
Yeah, so I think I just slowly kind of phased out of seeing most of my doctors, and they would try to schedule follow-ups and whatnot, but I just declined because I felt that it wasn't the right path for me anymore, that they didn't have anything more for me, and so I kind of let go of that, and I think in a way because of how sick I became, I started to feel this, like, distrust from the doctors, and I didn't really have that much desire to continue going because I it wasn't what was helping. And so but I actually there were a couple of doctors that were curious about what I was doing and receptive, and I actually, like, shared, "Hey, like, actually, I went on to do this," and that really helped, and they were interested. And so there are still a few doctors that I really do believe had great and honorable intentions that I want to write letters to. I just haven't gotten to it because I think it's, like, hard for me to even, like, think about going back to that world.
and it honestly, based on what happened to me, it really helps when you're like, they are doing what they are trained to do, right? Treat the masses, and they are trained to treat acute issues, right?
Yeah.
Not chronic illness. And when you get into the chronic world, it's just not their lane sometimes, right? And there are some specialties that are getting to the root cause and can maybe try to help. But when you just understand that that's just not their lane, I think it helps forgive a little bit and appreciate what they are here for, and then appreciate, everything else that you found. It's harder to find, when we're trying to fix, but, at the same time, it's just that learning process. We just hope everybody doesn't have to keep learning these lessons for years at a time. We have to get to that point faster where we say, okay, you are acute and you're here to help me when I need surgery. That's amazing. And I need the pills. That's amazing. But in the meantime, I need to take care of myself. And what does that look like?
I think that most doctors go into medicine truly wanting to help people, and so I think there are many out there that just don't realize that some of these other options exist and that they're so impactful for healing, and so I do think that it's great for them to have exposure to that and to see like, "Hey, this was one of my patients that was super sick and they did these things and now they're living a full life." And so I hope that more will start to see, and I think people are starting to kind of ask more questions, and I think there are positive shifts happening in our
think so.
society.
I think so too. And that's not a knock against doctors. I mean, they're trained to do their jobs and, it's not their place to take care of our mental health in this capacity, right? And that's really what this has come down to, which has been so incredible and so fascinating. Thank you so much for being here. Rachel, we do ask all of our guests a question on the show before they go. If you could share 3 fundamental pillars that contribute to your well-being.
Oh, that's a great question. I would say the first one would be your mindset, your thought patterns, your beliefs. Just like we talked about a lot in this episode, just the power of your thoughts to change your reality and how, yeah, just how our bodies are designed to heal. And then I would say the second one would be having a solid foundation of nutrition. What we eat is what fuels our body, and it really, really matters, and it affects our health in so many ways. The third, I would say, would be connecting back to nature, and I think that's something our society has really lost, and I know we didn't touch much on this in the episode, but that's been a really impactful thing for me in my healing is spending time outside in the sunlight, getting my circadian rhythm back, and just
So getting off of social media for a minute and going out, and I see you're sitting in nature now, which looks beautiful. So
and
getting off the screen, is that what you're trying to say?
yeah, there's a reason why people say they feel so good when they're outside going for a hike mentally, it's nature is healing, and I think that's an incredible thing.
Well, thank you for sharing those 3 fundamental pillars that you've done. Rachel, if any of our guests want to connect with you, can you share how they can reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Instagram at ribeye is my handle, as well as YouTube. I have 2 channels at ribeye and at Healing with Rachel.
Okay, if anybody has any questions for Rachel or want to hear more of her story, feel free to reach out. Rachel, thank you so much for being here and spending time with us this morning. Thanks so much for listening. This has been Sophia Unfiltered, a podcast by Sophia Health, the #1 marketplace for health and wellness. Find services, classes, and products from the top health and wellness providers. Book an appointment or join live classes now. I'm your host, Riley Reese. If this episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear about it in the comments section of your favorite podcast provider or with a 5-star rating. Let us know what your biggest takeaway from this episode was, or share it with someone you hope to inspire. Join us again next time for more real conversations, stories, and insights that help empower you with the knowledge and inspiration needed to transform how we care for ourselves.